I needed to do everything I could to help the Latter-day Saints understand and love the Old Testament as much as possible.
I have the ability to share and inspire people with literature and history, but then also financially be able to help those less fortunate.
But we found that the Lord needed us, and I think there's a reason why we were there when we were there.
Hello and welcome to Latter-day Profiles. I'm Brian Howard. We're here on the campus of Brigham Young University, Idaho, and joining me today is Jason Wright. Jason, welcome.
Hello, hello.
Such a pleasure to have you here. Jason is a best-selling author of many books. Many will recognize immediately: Wednesday Letters, The Christmas Jars, among many others. I was looking back. I think you published your first one about 2004-ish, somewhere in there. We did an interview back in the day. You were doing Time Out for Women. You came up to Idaho and endured the cold once before. And back in 2009, and we were in the lobby of a hotel.
Yes, I remember it well.
Times changed. So now we're actually in the Sporey building to BYU, Idaho, which a little bit more accommodations. I remember when we did that interview before. I remember we could hear as people were moving in, their luggage clank, 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 clank.
Don't go look that up. Don't go look that up.
Yeah,
don't go look that up.
You told them not to. Now everybody will go look that up. But you still look about the same. I know I have
that
aged
is absolutely not true. But your suit is a lot nicer now. They're paying you very well.
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic.
The big dollars now.
It's a nice suit.
We've been doing it. Well, let's talk about this. You know, the book you have out right now is Even the Dog Knows. It was released in March of this year, 2022. So we want to talk about that. I remember when we talked the first time, you said you started writing as a child. One thing we did talk about, you had a book that was called When Sharks Attack was your first book. But one thing we did talk about, you said you had a grade school teacher that really was kind of a transformational figure, kind of got you excited about writing. Tell me about that.
Miss Sampson, third grade. She was just remarkable. Who remembers their... does your team, do you all remember your third grade teacher? It's just, do you remember your third grade teacher?
I do remember one third grade teacher, but it's for the same reason, because they motivated me to do something. But
that was a lot of years ago.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
It was a lot of years ago. When she taught you on that stone tablet to write and express yourself. No, Miss Sampson was, she was young. She was probably a couple years out of college. And she just had this gift for recognizing, I got 30 kids in the classroom, probably 20 or so actually back then. And this one gravitates to writing, and this one to drawing, and this one to painting, and this one to spitting spitballs, and this one to football or whatever. And so she would craft, she had to teach everybody everything, but she would identify that this kid needed a little more time on this and this one more on this. And so she pulled half a dozen of us aside on a Friday afternoon who she knew loved to write, and she taught us how to write a little skit. And I wrote a 5-page skit called Molly and Polly, and I probably have told this story 1,000 times, but it was about 2 bunny rabbits that wore leather jackets and rode Harleys and solved crime. Because why not?
Yeah, that sounds great.
And she loved it, and she said, you should do more of this, and so I did. And I came back in a few days later with a stack of plays, a whole series of Molly and Polly plays, and she read them all and gave me feedback, and we acted one of them out. I cast it. I still have the original with the names of the players from my class. And I submitted it to a publisher because I just thought that's what you did. I went to the library and I wrote down the name of a publisher in New York, and it was Scholastic, and they didn't publish it, surprisingly. I actually haven't.
They're lost.
Well, I haven't heard back. So
pending.
It's possible. It's still with the publication committee. But I have heard her voice. And that's a quote. I remember her specifically saying, you should do more of this. What does a third grader know about writing or storytelling or anything? The talent wasn't there. What was there was interest, right? Because I like to write. And that fueled something that later other teachers added to with encouragement along the way. And then some of that encouragement becomes critical, which is what you need. That's what you do with your students every day. This is good, but how can it be better? And so throughout my life, that theme has really emerged. This that you're doing is good. Now, how can it be better? And here we are writing books in large part because Miss Sampson believed in me.
You know, I wonder about that as you've gone through in your career, even though not as a full-time teacher, but you do a lot of workshops and other things. And she was kind of a transformational figure for you, kind of helped you out, boosted it up when you needed it. If you thought about, you play that role for a lot of people because, you know, the example that you said of what you write and the feedback you give to them, is that something you've carried with you is to try and boost people as you're meeting with them?
Absolutely, yeah. I do a lot of school assemblies, and my favorite thing is to, I'll spend all day in a school frequently. That's my favorite sort of schedule is I walk in with the kids and then I walk out with the kids at the end of the day. And during lunch, I invite the administration or the librarian or someone to pull out a dozen kids who are Jason in the 3rd grade, who like to write, who have an interest there. Whether they're really any good at it yet or not isn't important, but do they think they might have some kind of a future gift there? And we have lunch and we sit around a table. I've done this many times around the country, and I hear what their ideas are, and I hear the books they're reading and what kind of books they think they might want to write one day. And I take a moment to look each of them in the eye and make sure that they feel seen and valued and validated, and I tell them I love them. And it's amazing to me actually how often kids will, in a really unguarded way, confess that they don't know what it feels like to be appreciated like that they don't feel love at home. I had a little girl right before COVID. It was my last school visit. It was my last event of any kind before COVID. And I was in Arkansas, and I had this cutest little darling blonde girl at one of these lunches say that she couldn't remember the last time someone said that they loved her. And I was just heartbroken. And at that point it becomes about a lot more than writing, right? But I do meet, I've now been to schools enough times that I see siblings, and I have had some really special, I had an experience in a Walmart where someone came up to me and said, you were in my school 10 years ago, and you read my story in front of the class. And I remember that, and I remember what that felt like. And who knows if they'll go on to write books and do this, but they remember that they were seen.
It's interesting to me because when you do some presentations, some are to promote, you go out and promote your books, obviously, do that, and some are presentations for like keynotes. These ones with the schools, though, don't necessarily have any direct connection with book sales. They're just something that you like to do. Why do you continue to do it?
Because I can remember so many of those experiences when I was young, from Miss Sampson on up. We had an author visit when I was in high school. I was a sophomore in high school. My dad was sick. Didn't know if he was going to make it or not, ultimately passed away the next year. And a poet from the University of Virginia by the name of Gregory Orr came in. Look up Gregory Orr's work, primarily poetry, but also a beautiful memoir. He came to our class. There were probably 25 creative writing students in this class. And he, much like Miss Sampson had done, sort of built us up and then told us how hard it was going to be. You know, if you think this will be easy, think again and go down another career path, because it's going to be brutal, but it's worth it, and here's why. I want to be that kind of a voice for someone sitting in the class, even if that young person says, I really want to teach, or I want to be a dentist, or I want to be a long-haul truck driver. That's okay. Whatever that dream ends up being is okay, as long as you continue to have a passion for telling stories. So that's really what I'm doing when I teach workshops and speak in schools, is help kids understand that all writing is storytelling, and storytelling is the key to staying connected to families, to communities, to classmates, to friends. Storytelling is really what fuels us all. The scriptures are all about storytelling, right?
Yeah. Favorite parts. Once I figured out they were stories, I like to read the scriptures.
Absolutely, yeah.
You were always a full-time writer.
Right.
You had careers before that. That leap into self-employment, full-time writing, that's got to be kind of a step into the dark. What was that like for you?
PTSD. It was. I shake when I think about it. It was really hard. In fact, I would do it differently now. You know, we like to look back at our life and say, well, no regrets. Well, no, I do. I have plenty. Just ask my wife if she's watching right now. She's going, yeah, so many regrets. I would have worked longer and had that side hustle, as we call it now, longer, because that's a tough transition. People feel like, well, if you have a book that makes a New York Times list or gets optioned for a film or whatever, that suddenly you're James Patterson or John Grisham or J.K. Rowling. No, that's not That's not how it works. And so I made the leap a little bit early, probably. So if there's someone watching now who's wondering what that might look like, keep your day job as long as you can, because the 401k and the health insurance is pretty important. Now, having said all of that, I'm enormously grateful for the support that we had through that transition, and people have been just so supportive of our books and posts and messages and weird, crazy family lip sync videos. It's become almost a family brand of trying to put some light and goodness out into a world that needs it.
Well, I know, especially like the Christmas jars, that spurred a lot of people creating Christmas jars to share with other people, a lot of generosity with that. Wednesday letter certainly helped people get back into writing letters again. That spurred a lot of those things. What, I think you probably have a community out there. I know you do a lot of social media stuff. What's that interaction like with you and your followers, I guess? Followers, the people who follow you on social media and are regulars, I guess.
Yeah, followers. It is the term we use, and you teach this, right? I mean, this is what you do on campus every day, is teach this.
Makes you feel good to have followers. It makes you feel powerful, right?
Also makes you feel really weird and unqualified. And when people say they follow me, I say, I hope you follow my work. Because if you follow me, you're going to end up in a ditch sometime, at some point. I love it. I'm on tour right now, and have been since the book came out. And I know people will be watching this episode for the next 15 years, right?
Yeah,
because
that's right.
You'll still be doing this.
Keep Googling it.
Yeah, 50 years from now, people are still watching this episode. It's like, man, he looked good back then. I'm referring to you. I love being on tour because it gives me an opportunity to meet people who have been following my work for a long time and have never had an opportunity to meet me face to face. It happened last night in Ogden. It will happen in Idaho Falls. I already know because I'm saying tonight, whenever people watch this, months will have passed, and by then I will have had an experience where someone messages me and says, I have been following your work since 2004. I know you've been to Idaho Falls before, but I didn't live there at the time, or I was sick at the time, or I was working at the time. So now here I am back in the area. I'll be in Idaho Falls tonight, and someone will come up to me and with tears in their eyes give me a hug and say, thank you for writing this, that, or the other. I had an experience actually with a family yesterday in the Joseph Smith building. And I'll save you the long story, but it was organized by their son as a surprise because this father has been following my work since 2004. Everything I've written, posted online, the articles in the Deseret News, Fox News, he's read everything I've written. And so we sort of surprised him in the lobby of the Joseph Smith building. And I cried, he cried, we all cried to know that something I've written has had an impact on him and his family and his life is incredibly rewarding. Again, a follower of my work who has just been waiting for an opportunity to shake my hand and meet me face to face. I don't even know how to articulate how humbling and overwhelming that is, right?
Yeah, to be a part of somebody's life that you really haven't known, but yet
they know my children, they know the names of my children, they know about my dog passing away, everything and it's because I've put it out there for the world. I've always wanted to be sort of, a really open book about the successes and the failures, many more failures than successes. And so, yeah, in fact, he said, I probably shouldn't name him, but he said, I feel guilty that I know you so well. I've known you so well. I've watched your children grow up online, and you don't know a thing about me and my family. So we sat there for an hour, and I got to know his family, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's for those moments.
Tell me the differences. You write a lot of columns, both online and for publications, newspapers and magazines, and you write novels. What's that shift back and forth? Because obviously different subject matter, and if you're middle of working out the plot lines for a novel and you're doing these other things, how do you balance that out and try to figure out what you're going to write about and your daily workflow?
Yeah. I don't know. If you can figure that out, if your students can figure that out, I'd love to stand at a whiteboard and have someone tell me how to do it better. One of the reasons that I have written so many columns and I have gravitated, in fact, I've had some breaks of 2 full years without a novel, is because there's a famous quote, and it's attributed to about 50 different people, but it is essentially this: I like having written more than I like writing. And Judy Blume is the one that is most commonly, I think, attributed to having said that. And I know exactly what that feels like. And maybe you and your students know what that feels like. This, filming a show, is exciting, but it's really fun to see it done. produced with credits and on BYU television, right? It's just, that's exciting. And so for me, I get to have that really quickly when I write a 500-word piece for the Deseret News or LDS Living, or even just the stuff that I put on Facebook. I have an idea, I sit, I write it sometimes on my phone on the side of the road somewhere. It goes up with a photo, and there's this sense I've created this, and here's the creation that I now get to share with people. This is a process, right? This is months, you know, in a solitary kind of setting, knowing that it's going to be. I wrote this 2 years ago. I mean, I finished this thing 20 months ago, and it's now just barely making its way into the world. So, but in terms of the posts and the columns, I pay attention to the world around me, and I look for really interesting angles. I'll give you one that by the time people see this will be out. I met a woman on the plane yesterday. Beautiful, sweet African-American woman from Virginia who was flying out for work to Portland. Her name is Robin. I'm going to say her name because she's just, you're going to go look her up online and just smile at this woman's beautiful smile. So on the flight, we find out we have very little in common. I mean, politically and religiously, and we have very different life experiences in the past and today. We're just different people. But what we agree on is that the world is spending too much time talking and not enough time doing. And that's a direct quote from her. She looked at me with this passion in her beautiful eyes and said, we got to do more doing and less of this. And I was like, amen. Yes, we do. And so a friendship is born. We've now been communicating on social media. We took a photo when we got off the plane together. And I feel like I'm better because I met her. And her husband's now reached out to me and thanked me for the interaction. It was lovely. So I have the experience. I write about it. It goes online a couple of hours later. That's a whole lot different than I have the idea. I lock myself in the basement and I come out 3 months later with a novel.
I want to talk about your book, but I did want to ask you, as you're posting, when you talk about sharing the gospel in normal, natural ways, I think that would be something that explains exactly what you do. Because you talk about your life and integrate it perfectly with what you're doing, and the gospel is part of that. Is that something you've decided to do purposefully, or is it just the natural stuff you talk about?
That is a great, great question, and I'm glad I have an opportunity to answer it in a deeper way than I have in the past. So years ago, someone commented on one of my posts and said, I'm really disappointed that I bought Christmas jars and it turned out to be a Christian book by a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because, and then all of the things that we hear about not being Christians and not believing in the same God and how we're not brothers and sisters with people of what he labeled mainstream Christianity. And I messaged him and he messaged me back, and his point was, you are hiding your faith and you're not confessing to your followers or followers of your work that you are a member of this faith. And it's unfair to those of us who don't support you. And it hit me. I mean, I was devastated because I hadn't meant to do that. Christmas Jars isn't a religious book, other than, I mean, it's about Christmas, so there's a tie-in to the Savior, obviously, in his birth. But it's, I mean, my agent at the time was a wonderful Jewish woman who just liked it because it was a great story, right? So I wrote a post. It was in the Deseret News and a bunch of online outlets, and said, in fact, the title was "Author Admits He's Mormon," right? The what we used to call ourselves back in the good old days. And so since then, I have said, you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe I need to be a little bit more forthcoming. So I have, through the years, sort of cultivated my own way of sharing what we believe in ways that I hope are really accessible to members of other faiths, because the majority of my readers and followers of my work are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I love them. And some of them are watching this right now, and I love them dearly. I live in Virginia, where our ward is this big, and the area around us is this big. The majority of my friends and neighbors, of course, are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I love them. I love those that go to other churches on Sunday, and I love those that go to no church on Sunday. What ties us together is a desire to be God-like. Now, if you don't believe in God, then it is a desire to be kind. Because my atheist friends, who are probably also watching right now, they know that what we have in common is not a belief in God, but it is a belief that kindness can change the world. So if you strip away the religious beliefs and you pull even just, again, going across the religious rainbow of every imaginable faith around the world, and you get to the very center, it is, are you willing to be kind? Are you willing to be kind? Are you willing to be kind? Because if you're willing to be kind, we can talk. We can be friends.
That's great. That's a great response. Well, let's talk about your book because I want to know about it. So it just came out this year.
Yep.
Even the Dog Knows. Give us a little insight of the book and what it's all about.
So the book is about a couple. They are married 30 plus years. And there's a prologue that sets up in a couple pages how they meet on New Year's Eve, 1950 at the Washington Monument. Fast forward now to a 30-year marriage in Virginia. It's based in Woodstock, where I live. It's fiction, of course. And on page 1, the wife says, I think I'm done. And she gets in her sister's car and she leaves him. And the marriage has been stale. And he doesn't understand why she's leaving. He can't. There are no obvious reasons the marriage should be sort of collapsing, but it is. And so she moves to Florida with her sister, and 3 years later, she writes him a letter. And she says, I don't feel well, I'm old. Moses, the family dog, the black lab, he's old. I want you to bring him to Florida so that we can say goodbye. Will you do that? And this really interesting debate takes place over the course of the next week or two with her husband and the dog and some other players in the family. And he's got to decide, is he willing to ride a bus, in his case, drive the bus, because it's his bus, from Woodstock to Gulf Breeze, Florida, to maybe save his family. 1,000 miles on a bus with a family dog, a grandson they've raised, a hitchhiker they're going to pick up along the way, to maybe save a family and maybe not. So it's a love story, it's a road trip story, it's a really complex family drama with secrets that need to be shared. And at its heart, it's about how far are we willing to go to forgive one another, to say things that should have been said. And the dog is going to tell you some of the story. So every 5 or 6 chapters, Moses, he tells you what he's seeing and feeling and discerning. So he's just a dog. He doesn't become, he's not a human being in the book. He can't solve problems. He's not a cartoon. He doesn't talk. But I do think dogs know things. And they have this sense of when a member of the family might need a little bit more, a little more love, a little more attention. And so Moses very much becomes the anchor of the family, the glue that might keep the family together. And there's a reunion in Florida that's really beautiful. And then a reunion on the side of the road later in the book that I hope is a big payoff for readers.
Sounds fascinating. I'm looking forward to reading it. I know you've done some things where you do pick up hitchhikers and talk to them, put them on camera. Is that part of your influence, part of this book, picking up hitchhikers to tell their stories?
Yeah, the Giving a Lift series that we did online a few years ago. That sort of paused because of COVID, because it was just...
Yeah, couldn't do that.
What were we doing? Yeah. And it's been a little while since I've had that experience in the car, but I still, when I travel, if I can take someone that's panhandling to breakfast or to dinner or something, I do that as often as I can. And I don't think that makes me special at all. I think a lot of people do it. The difference is that I like sharing the things that I learn, because I always learn that these people, more often than not, don't need your money and they don't need a ride. They just need to be seen and heard. I mean, I have had people in my car or across from me in the Taco Bell booth who have said, I'm the first person that's looked them in the eye in a week.
Yeah, it's got to be tough.
We can do better than that.
It's got to be tough.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about films, because Christmas Jars became a film. Enjoyed it. That was great.
Thank you.
Any other aspirations for any of the works that you've done, Wednesday Letters or anything else, as far as becoming a film?
Great question. So didn't BYU TV do a beautiful job with the film?
It was nicely done. I really enjoyed it.
They partnered up with Muse Studios, and they have a specialty muse in these kinds of movies. They spent more money than I thought would ever be spent to make a really beautiful, beautiful film. I could talk about this. We could do a separate episode just on the 15-year journey from publication to sitting in a movie theater and seeing that for the first time was really magical. And so much credit to the team at BYU for making that happen. So we have a script for the Wednesday Letters that we commissioned before COVID. I was on set of another film in Georgia talking to an actress that everyone would know about playing one of the lead roles, A&P in the book. We had a director, a production team. We were ready to go out with offers to some cast, and we had about a third of the budget, and this thing called COVID came through. Weeks later, weeks after that, in fact, it was on the way back from that Arkansas trip that I referenced where this all happened. And so we are sort of discovering our momentum with that project. We are talking to some new investors. We've brought a couple new investors on board. We have recently commissioned a script for The Cross Gardener, which I'm really excited about, which would be a very religious film. It would really be for the Christian market. Dave McConnell and you need to have Dave on your show sometime.
Is that right?
We'll talk about that. He played the lead in Fighting Preacher, a movie from a few years ago.
Yeah.
He's brilliant. Yeah. And Dave and I are working on a Christmas script called The Christmas Carnival that we're shopping around to some networks. So lots of good things starting to happen again after COVID was really tough on keeping momentum. And the people that left those projects to go on and do other things, how can you blame them? They had to go work.
Yeah, have to make some money in the meantime.
Yep.
Well, we won't put out a blatant call for funding, but if anyone wants to invest,
if anyone wants to invest and you've got some money buried in your backyard, what camera are we on? Right here. Call me. No, really, we do have some interesting opportunities for people to become a part of the team that are really unique. We have one opportunity in particular that I've never seen another author with film rights do. Interesting. That's interesting. So,
well, I look forward to those. I remember talking about Christmas jars clear back when, and you wanted to make it a film, and it took a long time.
It was already optioned then. Like we already had the wheels were already in motion then, but it took a long time.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Jason.
Thank you.
I look forward to reading your book and seeing your future stuff as it comes out, and hopefully more stuff on the big and small screen as we can see your stuff, in a movie format. Thanks, Jason.
Shout out to your team; they're phenomenal. These students, they make you look a lot better than you deserve to look.
I know,
right?
You're telling me. Hey, Jason, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.